The fervor surrounding Jeffrey Epstein is consuming Capitol Hill once again, this time with a fresh batch of documents from the Epstein estate that included explosive emails in which Epstein claimed President Trump, quote, knew about the girls, end quote. It comes before a vote next week in the U.S. House seeking to force the release of more Epstein-related information being held by the Department of Justice. Emily Brooks joins us to discuss. She is author of the Movement newsletter, which chronicles the influences and debates on the right here in Washington. Hey, Emily. So after all this new information was released from the White House, GOP lawmakers, conservative media, the message was this is a big nothing burger. But I wonder if behind closed doors there is concern that there is a risk to this kind of continual leaking out and drip of information regarding this case.
Well, that is certainly why you see President Trump taking to social media and publicly calling the whole Epstein files situation a hoax, right? He really does not want this investigation to continue. Republicans say that the emails where Epstein is claiming that Trump, quote, knew about the girls are a big nothing burger, as you said, and don't really prove anything. But, you know, every time that his name is mentioned is referenced by an email that Epstein wrote or by somebody else that Epstein emailed with in this big tranche of documents, 20,000 pages of which was released. That brings questions about his connection to Epstein up again and again. And that's certainly what Trump doesn't want. And so that's why you see him trying to push us all to the wayside.
So this information comes from the Epstein estate. There's also this push to get information from the Department of Justice. And we hear that regarding this discharge petition, the White House is lobbying Republican lawmakers to remove their names. Can you tell us about that? And is it even possible at this point?
Yes, that was certainly a last-minute effort by the White House and Trump, apparently to try and get a few of the four lawmakers who had signed on to this discharge petition to remove their names, because with their names on it, then that would force a vote on a bill to direct the Department of Justice to release more Epstein materials. But if they took their names off, then Democratic Representative Adelita Grijalva was sworn in, her first action was becoming that 218th and final signature needed to force that vote, at which point that was locked in. So in the hours leading up to that, you had Trump playing phone tag with Congresswoman Nancy Mace. A source told me they never ended up connecting before that, but she remained firm and did not remove her name. And you also had White House officials meet with Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado ahead of that final signature. She did not remove her name either. And it's very interesting because those two congresswomen, including also Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is another member who signed that discharge petition, all bill themselves as very staunch supporters and defenders of the president. But on this is the one issue where the most diehard MAGA branded congresswomen are splitting with the president. So it's very interesting there. At this point, the petition is locked in. They cannot remove their names. And this petition allows members to force a vote on this matter. There was going to be some kind of waiting period, but it looks like that Speaker Johnson is going to rip the Band-Aid off and bring this up for a vote next week rather than wait and force them to do the waiting period to bring up this bill later. So pretty interesting and a bit of a concession there that shows that Republicans are expecting this to succeed despite objections from Trump and Republican leadership.
Yeah, is that the thinking of Republican leadership? Just rip the Band-Aid off? Because it seemed like before this, the strategy regarding Representative Grijalva was to delay the possibility of having this vote.
Well, that was certainly one part of it. I mean, I think that there might be some wonky procedural reasons for that as well. Speaker Johnson, I will note, did repeatedly say that the delay in swearing her in had nothing to do with the Epstein files. But, the fact of the matter is that it did affect the timeline there. But now that the government is reopened, she's sworn in, she signed this, everybody is back, there's really no incentive for Republican leaders who are not convincing members to back down from wanting to get more information on this issue to vote against it. And so rather than bear weeks of questions about how many Republicans will vote for it, just rip the Band-Aid off. At the same time, you have this concurrent investigation going on in the House Oversight Committee, and that's where we got these document releases from those Epstein estate emails that were released. Speaker Johnson has repeatedly said that this bill underlying the discharge petition is moot because of this investigation going on, which has subpoenaed the Department of Justice, which has interviewed former government officials about the Epstein matter, gotten these Epstein estate records and released them. I think that reporters and other investigators are still going through the thousands and thousands of emails and trying to make sense of them here.
Regarding this vote that's apparently going to happen now next week, do you have an idea of how many Republicans are going to end up voting for the release of Epstein information? It seems like they could be in a difficult position. On one hand, they don't probably want to vote against the release of Epstein information, but on the other, likely don't want to cross the president.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation for Republicans to be them, and especially for those who are, counting on endorsements in primaries or maybe are looking at higher office. But from what I was hearing from members talking to them after this petition succeeded, is that there are going to be a lot of members who vote for this who did not want to sign the discharge petition, which is sort of a signal that you're defying leadership and going around them. But now that it is coming to a vote, they care a lot more about what the Republican base thinks and what their voters think and what their personal interest in getting more information on this issue than they are afraid of any potential backlash for Trump. And so I talked to Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska. He plans to vote for it. Representative Eli Crane of Arizona plans to vote for it. And some predictions are there could be dozens of Republicans who flip over to vote for this. And so that raises a lot of big questions about President Trump's control of the Republican Party and control of Republicans in Congress. The story of this Congress has really been that he has been able to direct and influence them to do almost everything that he's wanted them to do. He got his big, beautiful bill passed, but this is the one issue where he is seeing rebellion and does not have control of what the Republicans are doing.
So it sounds like it's going to pass the House and then it would head over to the Senate. What's Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune going to do with it? And what are Republican senators planning on doing?
Yeah, I think that's a big question. I think the last time that Thune was asked about this was before the government shutdown, and he basically said, well, this isn't really pending legislation in the Senate. And now I think a lot of it might depend on how big of a vote this is in the House. If this is completely overwhelming and it just the pressure campaign increases, maybe he will feel some kind of sense where he needs to bring it up for a vote. Or, if Republican leaders think that this point is moot and they're not going to be able to have a way to be forced to do it, perhaps it just goes nowhere and goes to die in the Senate. And even if it did pass the Senate, of course, it would have to go to Trump's desk to be signed by him into law, or go back to Congress and get 2/3 of each chamber to override a veto. So it faces a very uphill battle before this bill becomes law. But even if the legislation does not become law, it will get every Republican on the record. It keeps the issue alive, and it looks and points towards the investigation in the House Oversight Committee, which does have subpoena power, which is getting documents, and encourages the Republicans there to be as aggressive as possible in trying to get every piece of information that they can.
Yeah, I wonder, you mentioned the possibility of a veto if it does head back to Congress. I think it'll be interesting to see in the House if the threshold is reached, that two-thirds threshold that would kind of indicate there was enough support to eventually override a veto if it comes to that.
Yeah, that would be pretty stunning development, particularly on this issue. One thing that I have heard from Republicans and is something that they've been able to say is that, look, that there is this other investigation in the House Oversight Committee that is already doing this. And so this is in some ways an overlap or a moot point of what the bill actually says and the documents that they're getting. Advocates for the bill would say that this would compel the release of even more information, compel the release publicly. But that could be a very easy way for Republicans to say that they're not going to support this bill, but still say that they support investigation into Epstein because of that committee investigation.
All right, a lot of big votes on this issue coming up in the coming weeks. We'll continue to follow. For now, you should go over to thehill.com and subscribe to the Movement newsletter. Get all this great information right into your inbox. Emily Brooks, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.